Welcome back to the show today. We're going to have a very special episode planned for you. We're going to be talking about a very famous, although I think forgotten, character in music history. His name is Little Richard, and he was a pioneer of rock and roll music in the 1950s and 60s. So let's roll that intro, and then we'll get right into it. Richard Wayne Penniman, more popularly known as Little Richard, was a pioneer of early rock and roll music in the 1950s. His electric style and unique blend of jazz, blues, and pop music paved the way for the rock and roll scene to explode in the following decade. His career forever changed the music landscape in America, ushering in a new age of popular music and entertainment. However, as we will begin to unpack, Little Richard's life and career will transform more than just the music industry. In reality, Little Richard will have left his mark on music, film, pop culture, and all society as a whole. To begin, we have to understand who is Little Richard. Well, as I already mentioned, Little Richard isn't really his name. No, Little Richard is a moniker, a stage name. And in order to understand Little Richard, we first have to understand Richard Wayne Penniman. Richard Wayne Penniman was born the third of 12 siblings to his parents, Bud and Leva, on December 5th, 1932. As a young boy, Richard learned to play piano and sing by performing in his church. Yet his time in church would prove difficult for him. As he began to wrestle and understand his homosexual identity, his father, the son of a preacher, was averse to Richard's sexual orientation and lifestyle. This brings me to maybe the most important background information to understanding Little Richard. And it's best if I just say it bluntly. Richard was a poor, gay, black man living in mid-20th century Georgia. Needless to say, Penniman was not dealt the most opportunistic hand. But Richard took this unfavorable situation and managed to not only have a wildly successful career, but also he reshaped how pre-civil rights America viewed so-called people like him. Richard began his professional career by touring the state of Georgia and performing in small shows. It was during his small touring stints that he adopted the stage name Little Richard, and is where he started developing his very outward performance style. Little Richard signed his first recording deal with RCA Records after winning a talent contest in 1951, though his first records were unsuccessful. After that contract had expired, he released his hits Tutti Frutti, Long Toss Sally, and Lucille with Specialty Records. Even though he was very successful, Little Richard couldn't escape the, in many ways, inevitable discrimination. When discussing the issue, specifically surrounding his song King of Rock and Roll, Richard said this: "They wouldn't play my stuff, you know. I think they were afraid that I would hit. There was still a lot of prejudice going on. A lot of people in management didn't like it because I was a white attraction. If I'd been a black attraction like James Brown or Otis Redding, I would have been different. I think I scared them. I would have had the same stature as the Beatles and Mick Jagger. They'd let some of the songs through. A few black stations played them, but I didn't record for blacks. Blacks didn't want my sound, you know?" Richard also faced discrimination for his sexual identity, especially because his performance style so clearly communicated a socially unacceptable amount of sexuality. Little Richard had an undeniable impact on the music scene. To quote the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Little Richard exploded the 50s music scene with his thunderous piano and electrifying stage presence, setting the tone for the future of rock and roll. His unrestrained performances and visceral rhythms were unlike anything audiences had ever seen. Little Richard revolutionized rock and roll music, the music that would, in some sense, come to define the next 30 years. But Richard's influence extends beyond just music. Richard also influenced culture. As H.B. Barnum emphatically stated, Richard opened the door. He brought the races together. When I first went on the road, there were many segregated audiences. With Richard, although they still had the audiences segregated in the building, they were there together. And most times, before the end of the night, they would all be mixed together. More than just racial issues, though, Richard contributed to the social acceptance of the LGBT community through his flamboyant performance style and appearance in films like the 1956 picture, The Girl Can't Help It. In conclusion, Richard Wayne Penniman had to overcome serious adversity because of his race and sexuality, and yet he managed to author one of the most successful music careers of the mid-20th century, and in the process, he revolutionized music and culture forever. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.